Hi, welcome to How a Bill Becomes a Law. Now, we're going to start talking about how the ideas that people have turn into laws that you and I must follow. And the graphic here towards the front kind of shows you that it looks kind of like a board game. You start in one place and they can go around and they're to end up at the White House. And at one point, they're going to merge into one and head all the way down. And so what we're going to do is we're going to first generically look at how a bill becomes a law, then apply it to a specific law that is passed, the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And then we're going to do a simulation where we're going to come up with ideas that we think are law worthy and see if we can get them through our own modified version of our own House of Representatives and Senate. Okay, so if you'll take out your notes, we'll get started. So the first thing we want to look at is where do the ideas come from? Well, the first set of ideas might come from the State of the Union address that the president gives in January. Recently, President Trump, because he was elected and then took oath of office in January, he's not required to give a State of the Union address. But if you remember, he addressed both houses of Congress, and there he kind of laid out things that he wanted to get done. And so that's where his ideas came. The president does not and cannot introduce laws on the House floor, so his plans have to be backed by people in Congress. The congressmen or the senators themselves could come up with ideas, and constituents like you and I can come up with laws due to violent acts or fraud or... Sorry about stopping there. I had to blow my nose, and I didn't think you wanted to hear that. Anyway, back to the constituents. Those are people like you and I, voters, and we might have been impacted by, like, let's say, a violent act. That's where the Amber Alert system came, was because the family of the child Amber realized that we needed some way to get information out to the public as fast as they could, and what better way than on the highway system? Or maybe you were impacted by fraud or a personal experience that, you know what, you wanted that changed, so you wanted a law that's made. So you take that idea and you write it in this first draft form. And that first draft form is called a bill. Okay? Please know that it has to go through both chambers. So recently we just saw the House stop the health care bill. Well, eventually something's going to have to go back to there, and so they're going to have to figure it out. So, for example, let's say we have a national sleep law that we want, where we want to institute that in schools we need to set more time aside for students because of brain research and biology is telling us kids are not getting enough sleep. Excuse me. So we want to make it a law, and so we're going to call it the National Sleep Law. It needs to go both towards the House of Representatives and towards the Senate. So let's first look at how it would impact the House of Representatives. Well, to introduce a bill, it's going to be dropped in the hopper. And if you remember, the hopper kind of looks like a suggestion box. And it's going to get a letter called HR, not too creative, House of Representatives. And this is what is called the first reading. The Speaker of the House, okay, just like we said, the power of that assigns it to a standing committee. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about standing committees in class, okay? Now, in the Senate, they have to simply read it. That is called the first reading. Now, remember that the House of Representatives can't possibly read every bill because you have 435 members of Congress, as opposed to the Senate, who has 100. Now, senators do not read the entire bill because those things are 200, 300 pages in length. They read the abbreviated version. Unlike the Speaker of the House, the President pro tempore will assign the bill to a standing committee. And Congress.gov will show us those kinds of standing committees. And we're going to talk about them in just a minute. Okay? So we want to talk a little bit about the different kinds of bills here. A private bill that goes in front of Congress is on small issues. A private bill could be giving somebody the Congressional Medal of Honor, or a law that's just going to change something in Northwest Iowa. Whereas a public bill is going to be national in scope, going to create a national park where Lake Pahoja is, and that will be open to the entire nation. They'll get the number of HR for House of Representative with the number behind it, or Senate, and they'll have a Senate number behind it. The vote required to pass a bill through either the House or the Senate is 50% plus one, or what is called a simple majority. You'll notice here over to the side that I have a star beside it. That star indicates that that's the most popular and the popular way that an idea becomes a law. A second one, just as powerful as a bill, okay, just as powerful as a bill, is what is called a joint resolution. You might do this if you want to avoid the president because you don't need a presidential signature. However, notice you need to have a bigger vote. Instead of a simple majority, you need 2/3 or 66% of both the House and the Senate to pass it. This does not happen very often, and that's why it usually deals with temporary matters. Temporary matters might be something that has to do with the military. Maybe we're going to commit troops somewhere, and that's a horrible circle. That might be a place that they commit troops somewhere, and so they don't want to permanently apply for troops, so they want to do something a little bit more temporary. What is really important about this is to highlight right here, this is how we get constitutional proposals. If we want to change our Constitution, we know that we need to have the House and the Senate both agree. Well, a joint resolution is the way that is done. Another thing that could face Congress is a concurrent resolution. A concurrent resolution is really something like the idea of just kind of dealing with opinions, okay? It's not a formal law. It's just basically saying, hey, this is what we believe. Now, one time in the recent past that this became a really serious thing was when the House and the Senate passed an opinion about whether we should go to war with Iraq. And this was under the Bush administration shortly after 9/11. Many, many congressmen and senators agreed with President Bush in his decision to attack Iraq. But there was a freshman senator from Illinois who did not believe that a war against Iraq was a good idea. And that freshman senator was President Obama. And so sometimes concurrent resolutions can set the stage for a huge political move. Finally, there's a simple resolution where it only passes in one chamber, and it's usually dealing with procedures, things like how long are we going to talk, and or when are we going to adjourn. Okay? Let's turn to the next page in our notes, and we want to talk about the committee stage. And this is where we're going to stay for a couple of days. We've already discussed that the committee stage is incredibly important because this is where the work is done. The committee stage is a way for them to divide up the work. And it is so important for us to understand that there is no way in God's green earth that they would be able to get their work done if they did not have a committee stage. Oh my goodness. Okay? They have to have a way to divide the work up. Otherwise the task is much too great. I don't know if it's a fair comparison, but it reminds me of prom. There's no way prom would get done if you didn't figure out a way. They divide the work, and then they divide the work by topic, okay? And so in the House of Representatives, they become experts in their field, whereas the Senate, it's more general. The library it is there that the subcommittees have a lot of responsibility. They might use some specific organizations like the Library of Congress, which is America's library, the Congressional Budget Office, and the General Accounting Office. These are different organizations that will provide them additional information. You know what? I will write those out so that you guys can get those in your notes. The Library of Congress, which you can read easily, the Congressional Budget Office, and this is to help figure out what the money situation is, okay? And then the last one is called the General Accounting Office. And the General Accounting Office is basically, I equate it with Craig. I get so much money for groceries, and the General Accounting Office is going to take a look and see whether I use the spent money on groceries or not. Things that the committees do. Committee's job is to investigate, and that's where these organizations come into play, because they're going to help them investigate. Is this thing going to cost what they say it's going to cost? What were the issues in the past? They would go to the Library of Congress. How are we going to spend the money? Is this going to look the way it's supposed to? All of that we saw with the health care bill. They might do some intense research, bringing in witnesses and listening to testimony. They might even take a trip in order to figure out if they need to, if they're opening up trade relations with Jamaica. They would debate, and then they would vote. Okay. Once a bill goes through the investigation stage and the subcommittees and all of the tasks that go in front of it, they can have 4 options. They can pass the bill favorably, like thumbs up. They could kill the bill or table it. Table it means in those old days they used to have cubby holes and they used to shove bills in it. 90% of all bills die there. They could make additions to the bill, like make amendments, or they could wipe out the bill and put in a whole new bill. Okay? So what we're going to do in class on Monday is we're going to take a look at what is called the standing committees. Okay. Sorry, I needed to blow my nose again. The standing committees are the permanent committees that exist in the House of Representatives and the Senate. They're the only committee that can amend or make changes to the bill. And a standing committee is going to deal with the larger issues that affect the nation. The standing committees are the ones that have subcommittees that break down the jurisdiction. And 90% of all bills die in these standing committees. There are 19 standing committees in the Senate, and there are 16 standing committees there are 19 committees in the House and 16 committees in the Senate. So I've gone to congress.gov, and you'll notice that right now, the House of Representatives is not in session. The Senate is, so we could actually take a look at what they're doing. But we want to look at their committees here. These are the different standing committees that exist in both the House and the Senate. And I know that you probably have a hard time looking at this. It more than likely is really small. But we could take a look at their reports. We can look at what they're considering right now, what their schedule is. But here are the different committees. And in class on Monday, we are going to be working with these different committees that exist here and talk about what bills they are specifically doing. All right? Well, I hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you on Monday.